Welcome back to This Day in Irish History. I'm your host, Raymond Welsh. Today, we travel back to January 10th, 1970, when the streets outside Lansdowne Road Stadium in Dublin became the site of a powerful protest against apartheid. This day saw approximately 6,000 demonstrators gather to oppose the South African rugby team's tour of Ireland, sending a strong message against the discriminatory policies of apartheid in South Africa. The 1960s and 1970s were a period of intense activism worldwide, with increasing awareness and condemnation of apartheid, South Africa's state-sanctioned system of racial segregation and oppression. Sport, often considered a unifying force, became a significant battleground in this struggle. The International Anti-Apartheid Movement sought to isolate South Africa, arguing that its participation in global sports events legitimized its oppressive policies. Rugby, deeply ingrained in South African culture, was a focal point of these efforts. The South African rugby team, known as the Springboks, faced mounting opposition during their international tours. In the late 1960s, their matches often attracted protests, as activists saw these tours as an opportunity to highlight apartheid's injustices. Ireland was no exception. When it was announced that the Springboks would play at Lansdowne Road as part of their 1969-70 tour, it sparked widespread outrage among Irish activists, trade unions, political organisations, and student groups. On January 10th, 1970, the day of the match, thousands of protesters descended on Lansdowne Road. The demonstration was a diverse coalition, including members of the Irish Anti-Apartheid Movement, trade unionists, students, and clergy. Their collective aim was clear: to disrupt the match and draw attention to the moral implications of allowing South African teams to compete internationally. The protest was a vivid spectacle. Banners reading "Stop Apartheid" and "No Rugby with Racists" filled the air. Chants condemning apartheid policies and calls for solidarity with oppressed South Africans echoed through the streets. Protesters used a variety of tactics to make their message heard. Some attempted to block the team's path to the stadium, while others clashed with the Gardaí in efforts to breach security barriers. The sheer size and determination of the crowd ensured that their voices could not be ignored. Inside the stadium, the match went ahead, but not without disruption. Several demonstrators infiltrated the grounds, running onto the pitch to halt play. Though the game resumed, the disruptions underscored the strength of opposition to apartheid and the moral unease surrounding the tour. The events of January 10th, 1970 were part of a larger wave of protests that characterized the Springboks tour. Ireland was one of the many countries where activists seized the opportunity to challenge apartheid through the symbolic power of sport. These protests contributed to growing international pressure on South Africa, culminating in its exclusion from many global sporting events in the years that followed. The protest at Lansdowne Road also had a lasting impact in Ireland. It galvanized the Irish Anti-Apartheid Movement, solidifying its role as a prominent voice against racial injustice. The protest became a symbol of Ireland's solidarity with oppressed peoples worldwide, reflecting a deep commitment to principles of equality and human rights. As we reflect on the events of January 10th, 1970, we are reminded of the power of collective action and the role of sports in shaping social and political discourse. The demonstration at Lansdowne Road was not just a stand against apartheid. It was a stand for justice, equality, and the belief that sport should unite rather than divide. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Tune in tomorrow for another enlightening episode of This Day in Irish History. I'm Raymond Welsh. Slán go fóill.